Live, Jared.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm gonna record and then I'm gonna go live. And whenever you see it, you can get started.
We'll see the live thing going.
Yep. In a second now. Here we go. It's preparing.
On. All right, here we are live, everybody. Thank you for joining the Martin Eiden team for another episode of Ask the Expert. I'm really excited today. We have Marie Regal, founder and CEO of Avrio Wealth, based out of Singapore, and we're going to be talking about some topics as she advises a lot of people from Singapore. We're going to talk a little bit about why foreign buyers are interested in buying property in the United States. And then a fun topic, she advises a lot of expats and some financial strategies. And then finally, kind of on our entrepreneurial series, Anne-Marie is the founder and CEO, and I always like to know your journey on how that all happened. So Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, sure, no problem. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we talked a little bit of on the pre-show here, a little bit of how you got the name of Avrio, which I think would be great to share with everybody. But give us a little, tell us about yourself, Anne-Marie.
Yeah. Well, I'm American and was in private wealth management in New York City, and my husband worked for an investment bank. And he had the opportunity to move to Singapore for a 2-year expat position. And that was 14 years ago.
Wow.
We were there. We moved in 2007, thought it'd be a great adventure, see the world. Singapore's a great base of operations to travel. And then the financial crisis came along, and we weren't really convinced we would be able to move back to New York City and be gainfully employed. So at that point, I thought I had better start working again. And with my CFP designation and my private wealth background, I found the equivalent of the US Registered Investment Advisory channel in Singapore.
Okay.
And started working in one, then the other, and then another, and then eventually started my own firm.
Wow, that's amazing. And you started this firm, what, 2 years ago or so? Or?
No, actually, January 2nd, 2020, our license was given to us. And we will say, to some extent, starting a business in the year of COVID may not have been great, but we received our Singapore license January 2nd, and we're also SEC registered. That was February. And by the time COVID was sort of full blown, our phones were ringing off the hook because COVID created job insecurity, job pay cuts, redundancies, and also just simply time. People had time to revisit their finances and wanted a financial plan. My focus is on US taxpayers, anyone with a connection to the US. It could be Singaporeans with kids in the US, Americans, where one is American, one isn't. Whereas my other partners and other advisors in the firm work with different nationalities. But we really are cross-border financial planning experts.
Wow, that's amazing. And can you share with us what the name Avrio means and how you came up with it?
Yeah. So Avrio means tomorrow, and it just seemed to be a very good name for a financial planning firm where so much of our conversations are about where you are today and how we can help you achieve your goals, which are tomorrow or the future. But it was one of those online kind of marketing, naming, logo companies. And I just paid a small fee and gave a profile of the type of company I wanted. And I think, honestly, I got about 300 names.
Wow.
And narrowed it down. It was an amazing experience. I use them for the logo as well. And there were 2 names, as I had just said to you, Avrio, which means tomorrow, which is great for financial planning. And then the other one was the willow tree. So it would have been Willow Tree Wealth. And the willow tree is from China. and then traveled around the world on the Silk Road. So, you know, those were the two that kind of called me the most. But I thought Avrio really is closer to what we do. Everything is about tomorrow for our clients.
Oh, that sounds great. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but obviously you got to share your thinking process with everybody, which I think is really nice. You know, on the one hand, very logical and methodical, but also I think a significant element of care, which I think is really important when it comes to it. So yeah, so kind of the first topic here is you know, investing here in the U.S. And you mentioned that part of your group, you know, somebody has a relationship to the U.S. Now the, you know, most Americans, you know, for better or for worse, for most Americans, the concept is you want to own your own home because that's the American dream, somehow, somewhere pumped in, and then you upgrade 2 or 3 times in your lifetime. If it crosses your mindset to buy a second home for rental income or vacation or Airbnb. But your strategy with your clients is, how is it the same and how is it different?
So for a lot of people moving to Singapore right now, your entry level apartment is going to be somewhere between $2 and $3 million. And it's really, the returns are negative, actually, you know, negative cap rate. You cannot rent it out to cover your expenses. Even though the mortgage rates are very low, they tend to be about 1.5%. But real estate's just very expensive. And for a lot of people, they don't know how long they'll be in Singapore. So in the context of financial planning, I personally feel that diversification is very important, which is why I talk to my clients about owning real estate somewhere. If you can't afford real estate in Singapore, get on the property ladder in the US. I mean, there's, as a rental, there's some pain involved. We know, you know, not always being a landlord is brilliant, but at least you have somebody in a place paying off your mortgage. And when you do decide to come back to the US, you sell it, you roll that into your place, or you keep it for passive income in retirement. So property is a very important part of diversification in being on that property ladder. It's really hard to say to a client who's been out of the US for 30 years to come to the US and start all over with property because of inflation, right? If you're not, if you don't have some kind of money in property, then you might struggle actually buying that retirement home. And there's a lot of discussion about emotions as well, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I think most of us all know what property ladder means, but would you mind sharing that definition with us?
Well, my definition as a non-realtor, of course, may be different than yours, but property ladder is getting your foot in the door of a property that is affordable to you at this juncture. From a financial planning standpoint, we run the numbers. What is the cap rate? What's the MPV? What's the IRR? And let's find a place somewhere that fits, you know, your financial plan. And that's your base level on the ladder. And then through time, if it's an investment, you know, if we do a 15-year mortgage, 5 years, refinance it or sell it, move up the ladder, or buy a second property. So ultimately, we want our clients to potentially, depending where they are, keep trading up or keep buying more. So they're either building that passive income portfolio, or they get to the point where that final home has been pretty much paid for by all of the others on the ladder.
Wow, that's a great strategy. And what is your time window for that ladder that you usually see? So you mentioned 15 years or? Okay.
Depends on the age of my client. You know, the older ones are in a different position and might buy, they might actually buy their home, what will be their home, but they'll have somebody rent it out for 5-10 years. the younger ones, if you have a 20, 30-year time frame, we have a lot more we can do, right? Because they have time. Time is on their
Got it.
side.
That sounds that makes sense. So there was another thing you said that was really interesting. You mentioned the word 15-year mortgage. Why do you? And I can imagine, but I want to hear it from you. Why do you recommend a 15-year as opposed to a 30-year or 5-1 or 7-1 ARM and all that jazz?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's not so easy for an expat to finance property.
Interesting. Okay.
They don't have full access to US banks. So, we might have a couple of different clients, right? Clientele. All US expats are tax compliant. Well, the ones who are my clients, I should say. Or they become tax compliant, but right. But it's offshore income, right? So you can't go into your traditional banks with your 1040 that says, I have foreign earned income exclusion and this and that. So it's harder to finance. And the rates can be also a little bit higher. So the part of it's a financing, part of it is what the rates are. Who's getting rich on the deal? Is the bank getting rich? Or are you? Do you, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Is a 30-year,
or are you getting, go ahead.
Yeah. Is a 30-year the correct loan for you? With your age, because when I plan and go into retirement, I don't want people to have a mortgage, really. I kind of look back to a family situation where my father had Alzheimer's. He didn't have a mortgage. We were able to keep him in his house for years because he didn't have that cost. So I tend to plan a little bit more conservatively so people can enjoy their retirement and live their retirement in a manner, however they want. And it's not everyone is able to, but if I can get them to a retirement situation where they don't have a mortgage, I think that's brilliant. So that's where the 15-year comes from, because my clients tend to be in their 40s. You don't get a lot of 20-year-olds in Singapore as expats.
Right. Got it. Well, that makes sense to me. And I think that's a great, interesting. There was one segment where I had one of the advantages of the idea was, as opposed to starting a college fund for your kid, buy a house that you can afford with a 15-year mortgage. And then after the 15 years, you own the house free and clear. And then you can either sell that when they go to college or, keep it or something like that. So I think there's a lot of advantages with the 15-year mortgage. And I think it's a peace of mind, retirement wise, of not having, your housing costs are minimized to utilities and taxes, right?
Right. I mean, some people aren't comfortable with the 15, they'll do a 30-year mortgage. And you can always pay it off. You can always add more money on. But, we've got all of the spreadsheets and we just show them that, and it, here's how much the bank is going to make. Here's how much you're going to save. Where's that sweet spot where people are comfortable? And if it's a rental, you don't want to have to add money to the rental, any significant amount of money. I just had somebody who you spoke with. Somebody was trying to say it's okay if they actually top up the rental apartment a few $1,000s a month. Like, why would you add a few $1,000s a month onto somebody else? Somebody's living in an apartment.
It doesn't make sense. Right.
Yeah, unless that's your dream house and you're eventually going to get there and there's some circumstance that makes that an appealing purchase. But financing is trickier, and it's even trickier when they have no connections to the US.
Got it. And you help out obviously with that.
Yes. Singaporeans who want to buy in the US. So then how do you structure the purchase? How do you pay for it? Who will finance it? It becomes a little bit trickier.
Got it. That makes sense. And now, kind of shifting a little bit about buying, with your expats buying in the latter here in the U.S. I think some of the obvious advantages are you can buy any price point, right? You can buy something for $100,000 if that's what you want. You could spend $10 million if you want. And then collectively, how do you guys decide on a region to buy? Is it something, this is where I want to live, or this is the highest cap rates, or how do you kind of, or what trends are you seeing? How do you navigate it, and what trends are you seeing?
So a few years ago, it was a lot easier to pick certain regions where the numbers really worked. It's really hard in this COVID world now to really find anything where a client can buy a property and have the rental income cover the expenses until you go out to Kansas City, even more third, maybe fourth tier cities.
Okay.
Basically, it's where do they have relatives? Where do they have friends? Where have we had success with a property manager?
Okay.
Before, that type of thing. Some of it comes to me from new clients. They'll have a property here or there, and they introduce me to their team, and then we utilize their team to expand into that area. But really, a lot of it is client driven and tax driven.
Okay. That makes sense.
New York, it's really 50% down. And, as we've worked together, it's hard in some buildings. You'll never rent it for the cost of the carry unless you do put 50 or more down. And is that the best use of somebody's money? Unless they want New York. California is almost impossible to find anything. So it just depends on the client and their willingness to be open-minded on region as well.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And that I think is kind of a through line, but I think it's interesting how with your clients, if they have a connection to a certain city or region in the US, familiarity is helpful. And is it kind of in the back of your mind that I may eventually live here as well, or is that more further up on the ladder, or how does that come into effect?
It often is within striking distance of where they might want to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Or some, in the past, we've been able to find just great opportunities in other places, but we haven't come up with anything that great lately. I mean, Colorado, you could go to Colorado Springs and buy places for a while, and the numbers pretty much worked at every single property. That, like with the mass exodus from California, has become a little bit impossible nowadays. Somebody bought a place, I think we bought it in 2018 for him, and it's almost doubled.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And sometimes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you would know more about the trends of real estate if this is sustainable or not.
Yeah, I think, I think that we're in a slightly inflated moment right now because everybody wants bigger homes and more space. That coupled with, candidly, a lot of people have made a lot of money in this past cycle, since or the COVID cycle, if you will. And that, finally tied in with you're kind of limited on what you can do with your money, right? I mean, the luxury vacation trip is still 6 months to a year out. You can't even buy a new car with supply problems. So what's left? Stocks are boring. Right. I can sit in a house.
Right. Yeah. Well, so, it's also out of the stock market into a real asset, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of touching base. So if somebody a little bit, I'm interested in kind of what for the expats, what kind of, you said diversification. So can you kind of give a little sample of what a portfolio would look like in terms of percentage of assets in real estate and in stocks and bonds, or what, how do you?
Well, so it depends, that famous answer, right?
Right.
My kind of American taxpayer, US taxpayers who are Asian, their investment portfolio may be more real estate because
Okay.
that's what they're used to. The financial markets are less developed in Asia, and they like real estate.
Okay.
My American passport, born and bred in America clients, maybe it ranges from people who want zero, they don't want to wake up during the night to a phone call that something happened, so they'll do a REIT instead, which might be 5% of their portfolio, to maybe private real estate funds, private equity type real estate funds, to hard assets and physical real estate, which could be 20-30% of their real estate or of their portfolio, investment portfolio. Just really depends on the client. And when they bought and what they have, or, if they work for a company that has gone public recently, they pretty much sell as right away and buy real estate. So it's almost protect that IPO. We have other clients who get a lot of restricted stock and they'll do dedicated selling. So that goes into property.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can actually I can tell you for private equity, we might go up to 10%. It's harder for real estate because it's very different. It's really client centric.
Well, that's good to know, right? So you roughly said anywhere from 0 to 30%. And also a little bit of retirement or where you want to be, and the latter. It's a complicated matrix.
It is definitely a complicated matrix, and it's very specific on the client's personality. So, we always talk about it. It's in every meeting. It's in their financial plan. Buy property somewhere. Sometimes we keep moving it out because they're not ready to make that commitment because they don't know where somewhere is. Sometimes it's reactive. They get a job transfer somewhere else where they can actually afford to buy property. And then all of a sudden, it's different. They go, oh, okay, I'm ready. But it has, in my view, as a financial planner, I like that diversification.
So that makes sense. And it's interesting how you talk about how people sometimes, or just the process of just getting started. And that's kind of one thing. And obviously I'm a real estate broker, and I'm have a myopic view perhaps on it. But I find this often with first-time buyers is that they're looking for the perfect place. Well, I don't like that kitchen cabinet color, or, I can't, that bedroom is 2 feet too small. And sometimes, sometimes I have to say, I'm here to help you when I want you to find a great place. But between us, 5 years from now, you're not going to be here. And they look at you, open mouthed, like, how could you say such a thing?
Yes.
But that's the truth. And I think that's kind of coming back on the ladder of the sooner you get in on something, the better. A real estate
remove those emotions.
Right? That's usually where a good financial planner or perhaps an agent helps you. One of my favorite sayings is a broker in Miami, and always people, maybe I told you, they always come and try to, always ask her, and a lot of her clientele is French, like, what's the best deal? Show me what a good deal is. And her answer is, whatever you buy today, that's the best deal, because 5-10 years from now, that's part of it. So what, just quickly, I thought it was really nice that, or interesting that you said that your Asian clients are more real estate centric because the markets are not as or newer, I should say, right? Or not much of a history. And is that the main reason why they're real estate centric, or the it's an interesting philosophy of being heavy real estate, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's my view, having worked in Singapore for many years and understanding the private bank culture and the relationship manager culture and the fees of, transacting within financial products. And for example, most people in America have touched an ETF at some point. Singapore, I think there's like 60 or 80 listed on the stock exchange, and many of them are the derivatives ETFs. So, the actual Singapore stock market is very small. Then you have the issue that, so 80% of Singaporeans live, about 80%, in government kind of owned maybe or sponsored housing, HDBs, Housing and Development Board. So they help finance, they help you get into a property, and essentially in Singapore it's land lease.
Okay.
There's some freehold where you actually own the land underneath, but most is leasehold. So people buy into their HDB flats, which are that's going to be their entry, and they might move up, once or twice, but it's all very protected by the government. Then you move into the open market of condominiums. You can only buy landed property, which for us is a house, if you're Singaporean, or another status called permanent resident, if the government approves for you to buy landed property, because the island's so little that they don't want non-Singaporeans owning the land. So then you move into condos where, it's similar to New York to some extent, where a 3-bedroom condo is going to be $2 to $3 million US equivalent. But most Singaporeans can't afford that in today's world, right? The income isn't there, but they can come to the US with $200,000, buy in a lot of places in America, and get property somewhere.
Got it.
So that's why, what they lack though is there's a state tax. Nobody told them what they had to do. So I think that's why, there was an article recently about even in Canada, there's so little property left because of all of the Asians coming in and buying. You just can't buy. There's land constraints in Asia, in different countries, or price constraints.
Okay.
So you can come into large countries where you can buy, an acre of land and a house for $400,000, and it's going to be a mansion, in relative terms.
Yeah. Well, that's very insightful. Thank you. So quickly, the last minute or two, you started your own business, and I love talking to entrepreneurs. You want to share a couple of insights on your journey, or what pushed you, or what was the deciding factor to go on your own?
So having been a financial advisor at 2 different firms, I work very much the way you would in the US. I charge fee for advice. And the culture there is sales, product, and commission. Hide the commission. Don't tell people what you make. So a lot of advisors would laugh at me and say, you're a joke. You'll never make it. Nobody wants your business. They don't want to pay fees. And as my business grew, actually the places I was at were holding me back. People would say, we love you, but we don't like the company. So it just got to the point where I almost had to make that decision to put up and shut up, or go out on my own and pursue the vision of a company that I want, with the type of clients I want, with the advisors who have the same level of education and ethics
Mm-hmm.
So all of the 3 owners are your CFP professionals. We follow the CFP Board of Standards when we do our planning. And any new advisor who joins us has to be at that level, of some form of qualification. And they have to be fee-based, where the client pays their fee. They're not selling a product with a commission. Or if there is some kind of commission transaction, it's disclosed to the client and it's offset against their fees. So that ultimately led us to, I need my own company. And being that we're US and Singapore registered, my clients move back to the US, I can move back to the US, and it's fully, transparent, transitional, it's easy.
That's
why
great.
I'm able to work in the US right now without a problem.
Right? That's really great.
For the summer. So that was really my journey, start my own company, create my own vision, work with the people I want to work with, and then be able to come back to the US with my company and not have to start over again.
That's perfect. Well, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us today. The half hour always goes so fast.
It did, yes.
Well, but you shared a lot of insight and thoughts.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you. And thank you as always. I have very happy clients, who bought from you. You rent their apartments for them. They're always very happy. So I appreciate your support as well.
Oh, likewise. All right, everybody, hold on a second, Anne-Marie, for it to stay on afterwards. But thanks again for joining us on the Martin Eiden Team Ask the Expert series. See you next Thursday.